I remember the sound before anything else, the way my sister's laughter cut across the dining room like glass breaking. The restaurant was one of those polished Italian places on the Upper East Side, with velvet chairs and candles in crystal holders. I had saved up for weeks to buy what I thought was a thoughtful gift tucked neatly inside a gold envelope that matched the soft light of the chandeliers. She lifted the envelope between two manicured fingers as though it were something cheap left on the sidewalk. Then she said it words I can still hear even when the room is quiet. 12 months of rent, that's pocket change. Real gifts start at 6 figures. Everyone at the table chuckled as if cruelty were part of the entertainment. My stomach tightened, but I forced myself to breathe slowly. The envelope sat there on the linen tablecloth, glaring at me like an accusation. Inside was the receipt nearly $40,000 every month of her apartment covered for an entire year. I thought she might be grateful. Instead, she humiliated me, and she did it in front of an audience. What made it worse was the glow of cell phone screens pointed in my direction. Someone was filming, someone always island. I reached for the envelope, fingers brushing the slick paper, but she slid it away. Don't take it back, she said with a smirk. It'll make you look even cheaper. That was the first crack. I've lived in this city long enough to know how to mask my face. The trick is to smile just enough that people think you're unaffected. Inside, though, something was collapsing. I looked around the table. Not a single person met my eyes with sympathy. Champagne glasses clinked. Someone ordered another bottle of wine. The music swelled. It was as if my humiliation were nothing but background noise. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the chandelier. The crystals caught the light, scattering tiny rainbows across the ceiling. Strange how beauty can sit right beside cruelty. The truth is, I have always been the reliable one. The one who pays the bills, who bails out the family when their cards are maxed, who quietly wires money so the lights don't get shut off. When I was younger, I used to think it was a privilege to help. As the years passed, I realized it was a sentence. Still, I kept going because I believed loyalty mattered. That night, though, loyalty felt like a joke, told at my expense. The laughter at the table faded into a blur, voices rising and falling like waves I no longer cared to decipher. My chair felt suddenly smaller, the air tighter. I realized for the first time that I was completely alone in a room full of people who shared my blood. And here's the part that matters: I didn't leave right away. I stayed. I let the performance continue because that's what you do when you've been trained to put everyone else first. You endure. But deep inside, something was shifting, and once it shifted, there was no going back. I'll explain in a moment what happened after, but let me ask you first, where are you watching from? Drop it in the comments and hit subscribe. Families and money, those two words together, can destroy a person. This story is just beginning. I was 15 the first time my parents asked me for money. I had just gotten a part-time job stocking shelves at a small grocery on the corner. My back ached from lifting boxes, but I came home proud with that first paycheck folded neatly in my pocket. I thought maybe I'd buy myself a pair of decent shoes. Instead, I sat at the kitchen table while my mother slid the envelope out of my hand. "Since you're working now," she said, "it's time you contributed." No anger in her voice, just certainty as though it were natural law. My father nodded, not looking at me. My younger sister twirled her hair already, dreaming about the new clothes she'd be wearing that fall. Half of my paycheck disappeared into their hands that night. It became routine money for bills, money for tuition, money for whatever crisis came along. By the time I graduated high school, the pattern was set. I was the bank, and they were the customers who never paid back their loans. Years rolled by. Rent on my own apartment, tuition payments for my sister at her expensive private college, dental work for my father that cost $2,000. When my sister decided her phone was too old, I was the one who handed over $800 for the latest model. None of it was framed as a favor, it was framed as duty. "You owe us," my mother once said when I hesitated. "We raised you, fed you, kept a roof over your head. This is the least you can do." The least. As though 12 years of sacrifice could be measured in such a small phrase. Even aunts and uncles joined the feeding line. One borrowed $300 for car repairs and never mentioned repayment again. Another called me every few weeks to administer insulin shots because she feared needles, never offering a dime for my time or travel. Cousins asked for favors, and I gave them because saying no had never been in my training. Meanwhile, my own life shrank. I wore uniforms with fraying hems. My car made an awful clunk whenever I turned left. Vacations were dreams saved on travel websites but never booked. Every dollar I earned was already claimed by someone else before it even reached my account. I tell you this not to seek pity, but to explain the silence that grew in me over the years. You learn to swallow disappointment like medicine. You smile when others call you dependable, though the word feels like a chain around your throat. I was dependable because I had no choice. Saying no would have meant exile. What cut deepest wasn't the money, it was the absence of gratitude. When I covered the electric bill, my mother said only good. We were worried we'd have to ask twice. When I paid for my sister's textbooks, she tossed off, "Finally, I thought you forgot." Not once did anyone look me in the eye and say thank you with sincerity. There's a certain kind of exhaustion that money alone cannot measure. It's the kind that seeps into your bones that makes waking up feel like dragging a chain across the floor. I carried that exhaustion for more than a decade. And still, when the birthday dinner arrived, I thought an envelope filled with 12 months of rent would mean something. Foolish of me. But what they didn't know, what no one knew, was that I had already begun planning a test. A way to strip the mask from their faces and see who they really were when the river of money ran dry. That part comes next. It started with a lie typed in the quiet of my apartment long after midnight. I stared at the glow of the laptop screen, fingers hovering above the keys. Then I wrote it, "I was fired today." I read the words twice before hitting send in the family group chat. My pulse thudded in my ears. The message went out with a small whoosh, vanishing into that endless scroll of emojis and photos and requests. For the first time in years, I wasn't offering money. I was asking for compassion. The silence lasted less than a minute. Then the replies rolled in. My sister wrote first. "Serves you right. Maybe now you'll see how hard the world island." She added a laughing emoji, as though losing your job was comedy. My parents followed with nothing but a thumbs up. That was all. No phone call. No. "Are you okay?" Just a digital gesture, casual and dismissive. I sat staring at the screen, my hand tightening around a coffee mug until I thought it might crack. The chat buzzed with more messages, jokes, side conversations about dinner plans, links to online sales. My collapse had been swallowed by their chatter, insignificant compared to the price of shoes. Only one message gave me pause. A distant cousin, someone I hadn't spoken to in months, typed, "Do you need help with groceries? I can send something over." It was a small offer, almost hesitant, but it meant more than all the years of obligation I had carried for those closest to me. The people who should have reached out didn't. The one who barely knew me did. That was the truth I had been waiting to uncover. I let the lie grow. A day later, I sent another message. "My landlord says I might lose the apartment if I can't keep up with payments." This time, the replies came faster. My sister asked if she could move into the apartment once I was evicted. "At least it wouldn't go to waste," she said, punctuated with a smiling face. My parents chimed in. "Good idea. That way, family benefits." They were planning to take my home before I had even lost it. I closed the laptop, my chest hollow. Walking through the city the next day, I noticed things differently. The office workers rushing past in their pressed suits, the tourists snapping pictures, the man on the corner selling hot dogs, all of them seemed part of a world where survival depended on some shared understanding of kindness. Yet in my own family, that understanding had never existed. I stopped at a bakery window, watching a tray of fresh bread being pulled from the oven. The smell made me ache. I hadn't allowed myself such luxuries in years. And in that moment, I realized something sharp and clear. I wasn't testing them anymore. I was exposing them. At night, I lay awake in my small apartment, the radiator hissing in the corner. The city never really sleeps. Horns and sirens echoed in the distance. My phone buzzed with another message. "If you can't pay your bills, maybe sell your car. Or better yet, stop wasting money on nonsense." The irony nearly made me laugh. Every so-called nonsense expense I had ever made had been for them: phones, tuition, rent, meals. Yet now, stripped of their supply, they turned on me with contempt. I let the phone fall to the floor. The test was working. The mask was slipping. What they didn't know, what I carried, like a hidden flame, was that my financial ruin was an illusion. I wasn't broke. In fact, I was on the verge of something they could never imagine. And when the time came, I planned to show them. The restaurant had marble floors that echoed with every step, chandeliers that cast golden light across polished wood tables, and waiters who glided between guests as though on rails. It was the kind of place where birthdays were meant to be celebrated with grandeur. My sister insisted on it, her moment to shine, her chance to prove she belonged among the successful. I arrived quietly dressed in my best suit. though I knew it was not new enough for their approval. At the entrance, I caught sight of the birthday banner strung across the back wall. Her name glittered in silver letters. Cameras flashed as friends posed for photos. I stepped inside, and immediately I was greeted with smirks. "Alex, over here," she called, waving with the same hand that had tossed my envelope weeks earlier. When I reached the table, she gestured grandly to a chair near the trash station. "This table is for successful people only," she said, her voice loud enough for others to hear. "You can sit by the bins." The table erupted in laughter. Some covered their mouths politely, others laughed openly. The sound was sharp, cruel, and it landed heavy in my chest. My chair scraped across the floor as I pulled it out in silence, settling into my assigned exile. The smell of discarded food drifted from the trash station, mingling with the scent of roasted garlic and fine wine. Throughout the evening, the conversation flowed around me, but never to me. They spoke of promotions, vacations, designer clothes. My attempts to join were ignored, as though my words dissolved before reaching their ears. I sipped water, staring at the condensation sliding down the glass, pretending I didn't notice the sideways glances. When the main course arrived, my sister leaned toward me. "You should be grateful we even invited you," she said with a smile that never reached her eyes. "Not everyone wants the unemployed at their table." My fork froze halfway to my mouth. The lie I had written weeks ago had become their truth, and they wielded it like a weapon. The final blow came with the check. The waiter approached, placing a leather folder at the center of the table. The total was read aloud almost ceremonially, $2,800. Well, my sister said, folding her hands, "Alex always pays. Right." A chorus of agreement followed nods and murmurs of expectation. My mother added softly, "It's the least you can do." I looked at the folder, the number staring back at me like a sentence. $2,800, enough to cover my rent for more than a month, enough to ease the constant ache of bills. Yet they demanded it without hesitation, as if my purpose in life was to absorb their debts. Slowly, I rose from my chair. The room quieted, curious. I placed my napkin gently on the table, smoothing it with deliberate care. Then I looked at them, my sister, my parents, the so-called successful people, and said, "Then let successful people pay for it." Their laughter stopped. Eyes widened. For the first time in years, I did not bend. I turned and walked away, my footsteps echoing across the marble, each one louder than the last. Behind me, voices rose in confusion, anger, disbelief. But I did not look back. I pushed open the heavy doors, stepping into the cool night air. The city stretched before me, alive and endless. For the first time in a long time, I felt taller than the buildings around me. But what they didn't know, what none of them could have imagined, was that their sneers and insults had freed me. I wasn't empty-handed. I wasn't ruined. I carried a secret that would change everything. That revelation was waiting in a folder at home, stamped and sealed, holding the truth of an inheritance they could never touch. The night after the dinner, I sat alone in my apartment. The city outside hummed with its usual symphony sirens, horns, the distant thud of bass from some late-night club. My own lights were dim, casting shadows across the floor. On the coffee table sat a black folder. Its edges were worn from my restless handling, but inside lay a truth my family knew nothing about. I opened it carefully, like a priest unveiling scripture. The first page bore the official seal of the state. Stamped across the bottom was the mark of a notary, bold and undeniable. It was the last will and testament of my late aunt, a woman my parents had written off as eccentric and irrelevant. To me, she had been a lifeline, though. I never expected her to leave me anything. The lines on the page were stark, almost unbelievable. She had left me everything: her home in Connecticut, valued at over $2 million, along with a substantial savings account that would have taken me 20 lifetimes to earn in my old job. $2 million. Written out in legal language, signed and witnessed. I traced the words with my finger, half expecting them to vanish like a dream. But they remained black ink on white paper, cold and final. My aunt had seen me when no one else did. She had understood what it meant to be invisible in your own family, and now she had given me the one thing my parents and siblings had always demanded, but never truly valued: security. I reached into the folder and pulled out the house keys. Heavy, old-fashioned brass, worn smooth by years of use. They gleamed faintly under the lamp. Holding them, I imagined the wide lawn, the tall windows, the study filled with books, a place that was mine alone, not earned through servitude to others, but gifted out of trust. The weight of those keys in my hand felt different from any paycheck I had ever carried home. They weren't a burden, they were freedom. Yet, as I sat there, freedom tasted bittersweet. The image of my sister sneering across the restaurant table replayed in my mind. My parents' silence echoed louder than the city's noise. Even in the face of such inheritance, I felt the sting of humiliation. What good was wealth if the people closest to you took joy in grinding you down? I poured myself a drink and sat by the window watching headlights blur across the street. For 12 years, I had been their provider. Every crisis, I was the solution. Every holiday, I was the wallet disguised as a family member. And when I finally needed them, they laughed. That thought hardened something in me. The inheritance wasn't just money, it was a chance to turn the tables. I picked up my phone, scrolling through old messages. The group chat was still alive with chatter, as though the dinner humiliation had been nothing more than another casual evening. My finger hovered over the screen. Part of me wanted to send a picture of the folder, the stamped will, the brass keys, to shove the truth into their sneering faces. But I stopped. No, not yet. Revenge, I realized, is best served when the stage is set. They had humiliated me in public. If I revealed this inheritance, it would not be in private text bubbles. It would be in a place where the world could watch. I closed the folder, sliding it back into its place on the table. The keys I tucked into my pocket, their weight reassuring. Tomorrow, I told myself. Tomorrow, I would begin writing a story of my own, one they could not control, one they would never recover from. But before I slept, I whispered into the darkness. You thought I was nothing. You thought I was finished. You'll see soon enough. Morning light filtered through my blinds, soft and golden, but my resolve was harder than steel. I sat at my desk, laptop, open fingers resting on the keys. For years, I had used this machine for spreadsheets, budget reports, and the quiet grind of a financial career that no one in my family respected. Today, it would serve a different purpose. I drafted a post simple at first, then sharper with each line. I wrote about loyalty given without gratitude, about years of paying bills that weren't mine, about gifts mocked and sacrifices dismissed. I didn't name them outright, but the details were unmistakable. Then I attached the evidence. A photo of the folder with the notary stamp, the brass keys glinting in the morning sun, and the scanned page of the will showing the figure in black ink, over $2 million. My final sentence was a blade aimed at their pride. Sometimes the ones you humiliate are the ones who hold the keys you'll never touch. I hit publish. It spread faster than I could have imagined. LinkedIn first, then Facebook, then screenshots flooding Twitter, comments poured in by the hundreds, then thousands. Strangers from around the world weighed in, some with outrage on my behalf, others sharing their own stories of families that treated them like wallets. Stay strong, Alex. Blood doesn't excuse betrayal. My God, $2 million and they laughed at you. Unbelievable. This needs to be a movie. The post went viral within hours. By nightfall, local news outlets had picked it up, weaving my words into headlines. Finance worker inherits millions, exposes toxic family in viral post. My phone buzzed without pause, missed calls from my parents, voicemails from my sister, her tone wobbling between fury and desperation. A text from my father read, "Take this down now. You're making us look bad." I laughed, a sound I hadn't heard from myself in years. Making us look bad, as though they hadn't already done that when they jeered at me in a crowded restaurant. By the second day, the video from the birthday dinner surfaced. Someone had uploaded it anonymously, capturing the moment my sister shoved the envelope aside, sneering about real gifts. The internet tore her apart. Comments rained down with a venom she had never faced before. She mocked $40,000 like it was nothing. While most people can't even afford rent. No wonder the sibling cut ties. That family is poison. I watched the clip on repeat, not with pleasure exactly, but with a strange sense of justice. The humiliation I endured in private now belonged to them in public. Opportunities I hadn't dared to dream about began arriving in my inbox. A venture firm invited me to interview for a partnership role, impressed not just by my financial background, but by the clarity of my post. An editor asked if I'd consider writing a column on family and money. Even a small podcast reached out wanting to hear me tell the story in my own words. Revenge had blossomed into possibility. That night, as I poured a glass of wine in my quiet apartment, I thought about my aunt. She had left me an inheritance, yes, but more than that, she had given me a stage. She had handed me the means to step out from the shadow of obligation and into my own worth. I lifted the glass, toasting the city lights beyond my window. They thought I was nothing, I whispered. Now the whole world knows better. It didn't take long for the fallout to begin. By the end of the week, the family name, which once carried modest respect in our neighborhood, was being whispered with pity and scorn. At the grocery store where my mother liked to brag about her children, clerks now lowered their eyes or smirked when she entered. My father's church group, the one place he clung to authority, quietly asked him to take a break until things cooled down. But the heaviest blow landed on my sister. The bakery she co-owned with her husband had always been her pride, her proof of success. After the video of her dismissing $40,000 as pocket change went viral, customers vanished. Online reviews flooded and calling her arrogant, ungrateful, a bully. Within 2 weeks, the bakery shut its doors for good. I learned this not from her but from the local paper. The family group chat went quiet, then sputtered with messages I ignored. "Alex, you need to fix this," my mother wrote. "You've ruined us," my father added. "Do you realize what you've done?" my sister demanded. I scrolled through the words without answering. For once, silence was mine to give. But the humiliation didn't stop at finances. My youngest sibling, still in school, found the video replayed on classmates' phones, looped endlessly, with captions that mocked the family. "Imagine your sister laughing at 40 grand," one boy jeered in the background. The whispers, the pointing, the sudden distance from friends, it all piled on. I heard about it through a mutual acquaintance, someone who pulled me aside and said gently, "They're paying for what they did." I won't pretend I felt nothing. Part of me ached, remembering how many years I had carried them on my back, but another part, colder, whispered that justice rarely comes without pain. They had chosen humiliation as their language. Now they were fluent in it themselves. Days passed, then weeks. Their calls grew more desperate. My father left a voicemail, voice ragged. "We didn't mean it like that. Family sticks together. Please, let's talk." My mother tried another approach. "Think of your aunt. She wouldn't want this fighting. We're still your parents." And my sister, her message dripped with venom even as it begged. "You think you're better than us now? Money doesn't make you family." I deleted them all. Instead, I poured myself into new beginnings. Meetings with investors, tours of the inherited estate, long walks through rooms filled with light, imagining what a future could look like when it was finally mine to design. The silence from my family was replaced by the hum of opportunity, a rhythm I had never been allowed to hear before. Still at night, I sometimes lay awake in the vast house, listening to the creak of old floorboards and the rustle of wind in the trees. Family ties, no matter how poisoned, do not dissolve without leaving scars. But scars are proof of survival. They had lost their bakery, their reputation, their borrowed sense of superiority. I had lost only the illusion that they would ever care. And in that exchange, I had finally gained something worth keeping. The first morning, I woke up in the new condo. The light filled the entire room. No curtains yet, just tall windows overlooking Central Park. I stood there barefoot, holding a set of golden keys in my hand, and for the first time in years I felt weightless. Not because life was easy now, it never truly is, but because the chains I had carried for so long were gone. I made coffee in a quiet kitchen where no one would barge in demanding money. The cabinets still smelled of new wood. The marble counters gleamed under the morning sunday. I sipped slowly, letting the warmth spread through me. Silence, once a punishment, had become a gift. My phone buzzed on the counter. Another message from my sister. I didn't open it. I didn't need to. Every word she could say had already been said in laughter across a restaurant table in sneers that cut deeper than knives. Family, she once told me, was about sticking together. But what she meant was that I should hold them up while they stepped on my shoulders. Not anymore. Sometimes I walk through the estate my aunt left me. The garden is overgrown. The study smells faintly of dust and old paper, but it feels alive in a way my parents' home never did. Her spirit lingers there, not as a ghost, but as a reminder she saw me when others refused to. She gave me a chance to live without apology. And in those quiet halls, I think about what family really means. Blood may connect you, but respect, kindness, and gratitude are what bind you. Without those, family is just a word. Do I regret exposing them? No. Some people deserve the mirror held to their faces, no matter how cruel the reflection. They taught me humiliation. I returned it tenfold. They mistook me for weak, but wealth was never the real revenge. Dignity was. I placed the golden keys on the mantelpiece next to a framed photo of my aunt. You saved me, I whispered, and I won't waste what you left behind. The city pulsed outside my window, restless, alive. I wasn't afraid anymore. My story was no longer theirs to write. Sometimes losing your family is how you find your worth. If you think I made the right move, comment right. If you would have handled it differently, share your idea below.